Hey there, I'm Styler Peralta Ramos. I'm a wildlife photographer from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and today is a really special day because it is release day for the Canon R5 Mark II. And thanks to my friends over at Pictureline in Salt Lake City, I get to play with this camera on opening day. So this is super exciting. I'm going to do a quick unboxing for you in this video. And then over the next couple days, I'm going to be releasing more videos. I'm going to do a setup guide for wildlife photography. We're going to do like a triple back button focus setup, a speed boost and all that. So stay tuned for that video. But for now, we're going to do a quick unboxing of this awesome camera. So as you can see, I have a couple boxes here. This is the BGR20. This is the battery grip. I like to do a lot of vertical shooting, and also I like to not be switching batteries out. So I really like these vertical grips. You can get one that has a fan built into it if you're big into video shooting. For me, this is my favorite one because it's going to be best for photography. And then I picked up two of these extra LPE6P batteries. Actually, I picked up three of them. And then there's the one that comes in the camera itself. That way I always have two batteries that are fully charged to swap out into this grip. So let's open this thing up and see what's inside. So we'll do the little opening here. We have a cable here. So this will be a USB-C cable, I believe. Which we can use to charge the camera, as well as do data transfer, but I usually use a memory card reader for that. We've got our manual here. I've already read through this online, and I'm going to help you with a setup guide, so you can just toss this to the side for now and just wait for that video. We've got the usual charger here, our R5 Mark II strap. I'm not going to use that probably. And then in here, take this out like that. Let me just get some of this mess out of the way. And right here is the camera. So we've got this little cloth bag that it's in. And let me get this out of the way. And here is the moment of truth. There it is. That is the Canon R5 Mark II. Future Styler here. I just wanted to add a little bit to this video to explain why I actually purchased this camera for my wildlife photography business. And I have put a lot of thought into this upgrade. And so I want to just talk a little bit about what my thought process was and why I think this is going to be the best camera for me, at least right now. Compared to the R5 Mark I, the R5 Mark I, don't get me wrong, is a perfectly capable camera for wildlife photography. In fact, it's one of the best cameras on the market still for wildlife photography. The reason I wanted to upgrade is because on the R5 Mark I, occasionally the autofocus was just not quite as good as, what I often see coming out of Nikon cameras as well as Sony cameras, or even the newer Canon cameras. In wildlife photography, autofocus is super important. The R5 Mark II brought a lot of new autofocus improvements. We have faster sensor readout, which helps increase the speed in which the camera can track moving subjects, as well as we have a new chip in here, the Digic accelerator, which just massively improves the processing power in this camera to be able to make autofocus adjustments. Now, one of the biggest things that made the R5 Mark I Not quite as great to me as newer cameras, including this new R5 Mark II, is the fact that the electronic shutter on the R5 Mark I was just not particularly usable for me. First of all, because the electronic shutter drops your files down to 12-bit rather than 14-bit, so you get a pretty significant dip in the image quality by going to that electronic shutter. The second issue that I had is that electronic shutter at 20 frames per second, you couldn't dial that down. So basically, if I wanted to shoot in a continuous shooting mode, it was always shooting 20 frames per second, and you couldn't adjust that. That's something you can do on this new camera. I can adjust it really easily. I actually will show you in my next video. I program a button on here to be able to go really quickly from 10 or 15 frames per second up to 30 if something fast happens. So I can really quickly kind of do a speed boost on this camera, which is not something that you could do in the electronic shutter on the R5 Mark I. Another thing about that 20 frames per second on the R5 Mark I is it was completely silent when it was in electronic shutter mode, and there was no way to have any kind of auditory or haptic feedback or anything in terms of when the camera was actually shooting. You could see it in the viewfinder, but it's just one of those things that, if you're carrying the camera around, you might accidentally be bumping the shutter and accidentally filling your card or something like that. So having a little bit of sound for that electronic shutter makes it much, much more usable for me. The biggest thing with the mechanical shutter, however, on the R5 Mark I was that camera has a relatively slow sensor readout. I believe it's in the ballpark of around 16 milliseconds. The new R5 Mark II is about 6 milliseconds, and I think the A1 and Z9 are around 4 or 5 milliseconds. So the Canon R5 Mark I has a pretty slow sensor readout compared to the competition, and as a result, I was always really afraid of running into issues with rolling shutter with moving wildlife subjects. So as just a general rule, I just stuck to that mechanical shutter in order to make sure I wasn't getting rolling shutter. I had some sort of feedback that I was taking pictures, as well as making sure I had the best image quality. That 12 frames per second on the mechanical shutter, however, doesn't last for the whole battery. You can only shoot that 12 frames per second if you're above 60% battery. If it drops below that, it drops then down to 8 frames per second, and then I believe 5 or 6 frames per second. So you kind of need a full charge or need to constantly swap out batteries to keep that speed going. On this new camera, I'll be able to set this to 15 frames per second and then program a speed boost button here for when there's action, and I can speed boost the camera up to 30 frames per second. Now, I put a lot of thought also into switching to Nikon or Sony because of that faster sensor readout and some of the other features, particularly Nikon's lens lineup is really appealing. So I did a lot of comparison. This whole sheet is a pro and con list for me that I laid out kind of the differences between the Canon R5 Mark II, the Nikon Z9, and the Sony A1. I won't bother you with going through all of this, but essentially kind of what I came down to was that I think this R5 Mark II, while it doesn't have some things that I would really like from the Z9 or A1, namely an oversampled 4K 60, which Canon, please give us that in a firmware update if that is possible. We would love to have that on this new camera. But ultimately, I really like some of the innovative features on this camera. It has the best implementation of pre-capture, so being able to have the camera record essentially what happens half a second before you press the shutter. We get raw files with that on this camera, which you can't on those other two. We do have 8K 60, so worst case, I can shoot 8K 60 and then bring it down to 4K. I would love to be able to shoot oversampled, but it's not the end of the world. I'm really used to Canon bodies. I just really like the feel of them. And I have a lot invested in my Canon lenses. And, you know, I think this is just going to be probably the fastest autofocusing camera of the Z9 and A1. Preliminary results show that the autofocus is just really great in this camera. And at the end of the day, autofocus is one of those things that is just kind of the most important. So the things that I would like to see in a Z9 or A1, it's just not worth that extra money that I'd have to spend in order to switch to one of those brands over this Canon R5 Mark II, which selling one of my R5 Mark Is in order to help pay for this, it's still a good chunk of change in order to pick up one of these cameras, but this is my business, this is my life, and I found that it was worth the upgrade for those features. So if you're on the fence, I really hope that that is helpful, and I will be putting out a full review of this camera once I have it for a few more days. And after this video, I will be posting a setup guide for wildlife photographers and get you set up with triple back button focus. We'll get that eye control set up, and we'll do that speed boost button that I was talking about to really help you supercharge this camera for wildlife photography. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to do more of these videos on my channel, so I'll be doing gear reviews as well as stuff in the field as a wildlife photographer, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you so much.